experimenting with maybe doing this after games, and we have made this account the new Fish on First Bases account because we wanted to see, as games get more important as the season goes on, what if we do like instant reaction spaces after big games. But with the direction the Marlins season's heading in, despite today's win, we don't really know. So we'll start off even with the smaller crowd. We'll just hop right into it. Pretty abysmal week for the Marlins. They get the win today, so you can feel a little better about that. But prior to today, I dropped 6 of the last 7. Pretty pathetic week in multiple aspects. Road trip didn't exactly go well last week. I know the Nationals have been a pretty good team as of late, and David Martinez just got that contract extension. They're really clicking on all cylinders right now. And coming into today, they had the same record as the Padres, who they traded Juan Soto to last season. But overall, still a bad week for the Marlins. Should not have dropped the series, and Nationals dropped a very attainable series, in my opinion, to the Padres. They had the game right in their hands yesterday, and as you look at the tweet on top of your screen, David Robertson, pretty much due to in part because of that, removed from the closer role, will probably end up being 7th or 8th inning guy now. Not unclear today just because he didn't pitch. Tanner Scott, in his first game since this news came out, ended up succeeding and saved the game. 2 runs today. Jorge Soler, home run. Of course, it's just one win, and the win on Tuesday against the Padres. The rest pretty bad this week. So, Eli, just your general thoughts from a less than exciting week from the Marlins.
It all starts to me just with the offense, and that even continued in this much-needed win at the very end. That still is the big concern. And we just had an article by Alex Krutchik kind of laying it out, how, especially early in games, this team just does not produce much at all, aside from a couple scattered solo home runs, basically. And today they get a 2-run homer for Soler, and that ends up making the difference in the game, that there was somebody on base for that particular moment. But yeah, this offense, I thought the moves that they made at the deadline and the good performance you continue to get from Josh Bell and Jake Berger, that it was deep enough to avoid a kind of extended stretch like this, where they're just not doing anything, especially early in games. And apparently that has not been the case. It's been several guys slumping at the same time, most prominently Luis Arraez, just considering how high the bar is that he set for himself. And just on down the line to Joey Wendell and Brian De La Cruz. A lot of these guys just, they're not getting the runs that they needed. You knew that because of the way they approached the deadline, that the 5th rotation spot was going to be kind of messy the rest of the way. And kind of surprisingly, that's the game that they win today, is what would have been the 5th rotation spot that is vacant for a while, and they had to bullpen it together, and they're able to get it done. So that's one of the aspects you just can't predict about baseball, is going into the series. You'd think they're going to win it at least one game, but you'd think this would be the least likely one, and yet they do it because of that. And it comes at a time where a lot of the other wild card teams are getting their shit together. So they've lost ground finally. We were talking about that first few weeks coming out of the All-Star break, as bad as they were. A lot of the other teams that they were facing directly in that wild card race were almost as bad during that stretch. And finally, some of those other teams have gotten it together. The Cubs have jumped over them. The Phillies are really pulling away with the first wild card spot. And then even in the third race for the third one, the Giants are all right, and the Diamondbacks have really caught fire for the most part. So now they have ground to make up. It's still only a little bit of ground. I saw a lot of dramatic overreactions yesterday about how that was the end of the season, how that was the final nail in the coffin. And I don't subscribe to that. I thought maybe if they lost today, you'd have to start asking that question, but it's still just a small gap. The issue is they have to play at a really high level the rest of the way. And we just don't have any recent evidence that they're going to be able to do that, considering the limitations in the offense, the up and down nature of the bullpen. And a lot of the finger has to be pointed at David Robertson. He thought this would be the safest pickup that they made in all their trades, the one that would absolutely improve the team just a little bit at a bare minimum. And he has proven to be a liability. When you put that guy in high leverage situations, having somebody that's just having anybody that is not good at their job in high leverage situations, that turns wins into losses, which was obviously the case yesterday.
Isaac's here as well. We'll get Isaac's thoughts from the week behind us.
The week behind us. I was one of those guys. I didn't necessarily think it was a nail in the coffin, like a lot of people did put out there, that it was the final blow, the knockout punch. But I think if they had lost today and finally sunk to below 500, not that that would have been it, but I think that would have been worst case scenario, like I tweeted after yesterday's game. But man, yeah, it all goes back to the offense, like Eli said, especially against starting pitchers. 8 runs scored against your opponent's starting pitchers in basically 5 full games worth. That is incredible. It is wow. And when you have every single guy in your line, maybe aside from Soler struggling, yeah, because I don't think this lineup is. I don't think the Marlins have ever put out a better lineup than they did, for example, today or yesterday in the last 5 years, and yet they're struggling to score runs. The starters are doing their part. Even Brian Hoeing did his part today. JT Chagua, who opened 3 times for Tampa Bay, did his part. I think he's someone that we could see if they continue with this opener stuff, depending on how well Cueto is feeling in 5 days from now. We'll see if he can go again to open. But it's just been, I guess, a depressing week for the Marlins. And yeah, in San Diego, they had a game right there for the taking, and they just couldn't score against Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. It was just a very frustrating road trip, and that frustration continued over to Lone Depot Park in the last 2 games. But luckily, they salvaged 1. They're back to a game over, but they're going to have their work cut out for them with Tampa Bay coming for 2 games.
So, Eli had thrown out some names of guys who've been struggling on offense. Who do you guys think that the blame should go on the most for just the offensive struggles altogether? Because those trade deadline acquisitions in the lineup have done really, really well. Bally showed us a stat on the broadcast today that I believe Josh Bell has like the 3rd most solo home runs this year, or in some time frame, something like that. But who would you guys point the finger at the most with the struggles, especially this month?
It's hard to point a finger at any individual batter on this team, but Eli mentioned it. De La Cruz is struggling, Sanchez is struggling. I thought it was very interesting that Skip, just after 2 games, went away from having Jazz lead off. I thought that was a horrible idea at the time, and he put him back in the cleanup spot. But a lot of the struggles could, be just the whole team not doing little things like advancing runners from second to third with nobody out. Tommy Hunt was very critical, and so was I, on Jazz failing to do that in yesterday's game. But it's not only Jazz, even though I think he's been struggling mightily as well. But they're just not doing the little things. That, like you said, run on second base, nobody out. They had Marlins don't score, not even get him to third. Nationals get a guy on second base with 2 out, and they get him home. So it's just a combination of all the hitters on the team not doing their jobs, in my opinion, not just one player.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. We've seen, just generally speaking, that situational hitting has once again taken a big step back to where it was on and off a lot of the year, where it's been a limitation with this team. Even guys like Jorge Soler, who's been pretty good overall during this bad stretch. He's hit 10 home runs in August, and as he's now 6th all time for single season home runs with the Marlins. He's also grounded into a bunch more double plays. That is the one consistent aspect of this team, is how shockingly frequently they ground into double plays when extinguish their own rallies in a hurry like that. And he's been a part of that. Just about everybody has had a little bit of a role in that aspect of it. Yeah, and I don't know, like relative to expectations, Arise is the one that has been underperforming the most in this area. I think, depending on how you slice it, this is arguably the worst offensive month that he's had in his big league career for Arise, to just not get hits and not get walks, even when in the absence of those hits. And his defense has been fine, and if not a little better than fine recently, but it's that offense that is holding them back. And there are a couple holes on this team. Well, I know that Isaac shouted out Stallings as one of the guys that's actually looking pretty good at the plate relative to what we've seen from him recently. Overall, though, both catcher and shortstop, those continue to be really big holes for them, that there's just not much you can do. There are, as we've mentioned on recent spaces, there are guys they could call up to play those positions, but frankly, even those guys wouldn't be surefire upgrades over who they have at those spots. So yeah, it's just, there is still a little bit of limited length to this lineup. And when you also have several of the guys that have been playing every day, also something that gives you that perfect storm of mediocrity.
Yeah, well said. So shifting real quick to one of the better aspects, I guess, if you could even call it that, as of late, the rotation. The Marlins did make a change that Eli pointed out earlier today on Twitter. Sandy's going to go in front of Luzardo now in the rotation. Luzardo's going to pitch on 8 days of rest now. And this is mostly just because we assume that a lot of these pitchers have hit their career high in innings, want to keep guys fresh. Sandy's the only one that's really pitched like this deep into a season and had a full workload. So just what are your guys' thoughts on that, the rotation and preservation coming down this home stretch here?
It's kind of that's where they're in. We've known this, we've seen this coming from a while away. And in fact, you could say it's been a little bit fortunate for them that Luzardo's been able to make every single scheduled start this year, that Braxton, ever since they put him into the rotation, every single scheduled start with him. And now with Yuri, after that very brief quote unquote slump coming back up from the minors, his last 2 starts have been unbelievable and as good as he has ever looked. So he still looks very fresh coming down the home stretch, and they're taking whatever steps they feel they need to take in order to keep those guys at full strength. It's such an inexact science. But I think all things considered, I mean, the rotation's in decent shape coming down to this point in the year when you have those 4 guys, and we'll see exactly what they get from the 5th spot the rest of this year. So as long as they look healthy, they're going to stay in this rotation moving forward. And it's people don't want to hear this, but it's a really nice stepping stone for next year as well with them. Even if you want to focus a lot on this year for now, it sets up Luzardo in particular. Well, you could say both Luzardo and Braxton. They're both in situations where there'll be 0 restrictions heading into 2024 with them. So to have those guys, and that just takes away the need for having to go outside the organization and get a quote unquote veteran starter. Now that you could argue that Braxton and Luzardo, this is kind of the final step for them to put themselves in that veteran starter tier. This has been an important season for them. And I think for both of them, it's been a pretty solid season for them. They are certainly part of the solution that has gotten the team to this point, not even a little bit of inconsistency from Luzardo lately, but yeah, overall, I'm kind of on board with what they're doing, and you got to give some credit. It has worked with Luzardo in particular, given his injury history. I would not have thought he's in a position to start 31 or 32 games in the season, and he is creeping pretty close to that.
Any opinions from you, Isaac?
No, I thought Eli went over pretty well on that, but yeah, that is probably your number one. Your best part of your team going into Swing City next year is that, 4 spot of starting pitchers you got, and you don't know what Trevor Rogers will be, and maybe Pat Monteverde is in there to help compete for a rotation spot, and a couple other options for Miami. So yeah, because you got to assume, even though Kim said that he's someone that you'd like to have, Soler might not be here. And you're going to have to use your resources to get some more bats. And they're showing you that they're going to need them. So, yeah, I thought Eli did a good job in describing that one.
You mentioned something there at the end. We'll fill some time as well, just because there wasn't much to talk about this week other than the fact that it was abysmal. Soler, of course, that's the elephant in the room right now. What do you do with him after this season? But with that injury he's had earlier this year, he's getting older. He declined the home run derby. What do you guys think that could maybe do to his market value? Is there any shot the Marlins retain him, you guys think, at this point? They're still a month away. Still got the offseason. It's a relatively weaker free agent market, and it's a very, very big offseason for the Marlins. There's a chance that maybe they pay up. I don't know. Anyone who has thoughts on that, we'll just go ahead there.
So, Eli, it would max out his player option at $14 million. I don't think that would be enough. And the qualifying offer would be close to $20 million, correct?
Yeah, we don't know 100% yet on the qualifying offer. We think it's going to be 20. It might be a little bit higher than that. Last year was 19 and a half. It should be a little higher than last year.
Okay, so will a team give Jorge Soler? Well, he would have to opt out, and then Miami would do the qualifying offer. That's how it goes?
Correct.
Okay, so wait, is there a chance? I don't think he would really be that interested in taking a qualifying offer because, then he's just going to have to go right back in the free agent market next year. And is he going to have a better season than he did this year? Who knows? So I think maybe they just renegotiate maybe a 2-year deal, another 3-year deal perhaps. That's maybe 15 AAV. I don't know if that's maybe an option. I did ask him that exact question. Is there, are they willing to renegotiate that deal? And she declined to comment on any contract negotiations, but she did seem somewhat adamant, even if it's just a DH, that they do want him back in the future. But they are going to have to pay Bell. They are going to have to pay all these guys. So it's going to be really fascinating to see. That's going to be sort of the offseason for me.
Yeah. So I would be cautiously optimistic that there'd be some sort of exclusive negotiating window there. I really feel if they overwhelmed him with an extension offer right after the season ends, that he might actually take that rather than going to the open market. I'm just skeptical about them making that offer. I think it's pretty black and white. That's going to be a choice between Bell and Soler. And I've continued to be in the camp that Bell is staying, that I don't think he's going to test the market. He's just not as good a player, honestly, that as Soler is when Soler is healthy, the way that he has been this year. I think Bell is going to stay, and I just don't think the Marlins are going to be willing to commit as much as Soler is looking for to be a DH, as much as they value him. I'm sure they would love to have him back at that. It's going to be a $13 million option, to be clear, is a player option as it's currently set up. They would love to have him at that amount, but if it's going to be 20, or if it's going to be more likely multiple years in the high teens or right around 20, then I think they're going to get. I don't think they'd be willing to go that far, but we'll see if Bruce Sherman surprises us on that.
So you agree that you'd probably be less willing to take that qualifying offer, correct?
Yeah, it's looking a little unlikely. I'd have to. He continues to, every time it looks like he's slowing down a little bit. He has a stretch where he has right now, where he's not a perfect player, but he's hitting almost all of his hits are home runs these last few weeks, and there's a lot of value in that. The rest of the free agent class around him continues to not look great. I think Matt Chapman entering this year, Matt Chapman was like the number one overall, like position player only guy out there, excluding Ohtani. I think you'd say like entering this year that Matt Chapman was like the biggest competition out there. And since his good April, he's been a pretty bad offensive player. And you just go down the list, there's just not a lot of guys that are definitely better hitters than Soler is. He is near the very top in terms of overall hitters that are going to be available. I guess you could say Cody Bellinger has now leapfrogged ahead of Chapman, and Bellinger is going to be the biggest name out there. But there are still a lot of teams that are going to be looking to make acquisitions. And I think he's going to be high enough on there where he's definitely going to get multi-year offers that are close, if not even just as high as that qualifying offer.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that it was reported by Mitch that there might be some mutual interest from Soler to want to stay with Miami, but I don't think he's going to, just stay for a hometown discount at all. So that is worth noting that, he might be willing to stay if the price is right, but I think we're just a little bit pessimistic that Sherman would be willing to reach that price.
Yeah, it is a fair question. And like you guys had said, he's going to be expensive. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Bell. I think Arise has definitely done enough to deserve an extension. Luzardo, maybe. I don't believe so on Jazz, but you got some extensions that need to be given out. Sandy's contract's going to get a little more expensive in a few years. So I would say even right now with how bad the Marlins have been the last couple of weeks, especially the last month and a half, still enjoy it while it's here. We don't know what's going to happen with these players. And there's a month left. I would just say enjoy the ride and enjoy these players. But the last thing I wanted to get to before we do week ahead and the best part, fan questions, is September call-ups. They're coming really, really soon. I think we'll know who the next couple players to come up to the roster are by the time we do the next State of the Fish. So we talked about our candidates, and the time has come. Who are your guys' final two guys you think are going to make the roster? Now, I'm going to say for sure Xavier Everett is one of mine. I really don't know what's going to happen with that extra 28th spot, but I would like to hear what you guys have as we're finally getting there towards the September call-ups.
Everybody hates the answer, but that extra last spot is going to be whatever random pitcher they need to fill out their staff. It's not just enough to what they're trying to do in terms of limiting the workloads of those young starters, as we talked about before. They're going to want and use a 14th pitcher. It's going to be whoever. You just look at the staff right now, and it's missing Johnny Cueto and Edward Cabrera. So we think that Cueto could be back as soon as he's eligible to come off the IL on September 2nd. Could be him. Or if they're really satisfied with what they see with Cabrera soon, it could be him. It's going to be 14 pitchers, and it's not going to be any super sexy new pitcher that we haven't already seen before. They're going to use that spot to lengthen the bullpen a little bit more. And that's it. Sorry, everybody. It's just going to be that. And I'm not even totally sure if it's going to be Edwards, probably Xavier Edwards. I guess they'll continue to look at what Alfaro is doing. As it turns out, Alfaro isn't even playing every day down in AAA. It's been kind of a limited role. So I don't think he's necessarily pressing to get called up as a third catcher in there. It's probably going to be Xavier Edwards, and it's definitely going to be another pitcher, just when all the pitchers are healthy and available at the same time. I think it's going to be relatively clear cut that way.
Looks like we lost Isaac. Well, then again, we'll get the fan questions, I guess, quickly here. Or we'll do week ahead. I appreciate you guys for listening. Different time this week. We want to try and go back to the normal time next week. Oh, we've got Isaac coming back. Hold on. I want to hear what he has to say. He's probably in agreement. I would think that maybe they do Eddie. Maybe it's a random reliever. I don't know.
Yeah.
Isaac.
And I mean, I guess the most fun random reliever that we could see for the first time is Anthony Maldonado.
That would be a fun reliever.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, do they value him a little bit more than Tommy Nance? Maybe the fact that Tommy Nance has now been on the roster for 4 games and has not pitched, I think that shows you that he's not really a high priority guy. So maybe they do that. Maybe they swap out one pitcher for another. Yeah. But yeah, either way, as much as they need offense, I mean, Troy Johnson has nowhere to play right now. I mean, really, the only way they can be bold and shake these up is if they actually cut some of these veterans that aren't doing anything. And I mean, the most obvious one is Joey Wendell, but he plays a position at shortstop that, I mean, these other options aren't like great fits. Edwards is not a shortstop. Jacob Amaya has not been hitting well since his initial cup of coffee in the majors. So that's I would encourage that call with that decision, with the fact that Wendell is a pending free agent, and that he has been hitting so badly over an extended period of time now. I think that's probably the appropriate move, would be say goodbye to Wendell and just try your luck with the guy next man up in the minors. We play Hampson a little bit more at shortstop, because at least Hampson has been able to hit somewhat this season. So yeah, that's probably a move I'd advocate for at this point with Wendell. Say goodbye to him. But yeah, I'm not super optimistic that they're going to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would agree too much with doing that, just because at this stage in the season, he has allegedly been your captain the whole year. He has played superb superb defense at short, and we're going to go with Birdie and Hampson and maybe Edwards there. I don't see them doing that. He is also a left-handed bat, who granted is not doing anything, but I don't see them doing that. I'm not sure I would agree with getting rid of him at this stage. I think in the offseason, he's a free agent anyway. I don't think you're going to get much better production from anyone else at that position in particular.
Well, maybe on the defensive side, but on the offensive side, I mean, the only way to go is up at this point. But like Isaac said, right. The Marlins really, really value those clubhouse guys, which is why I was really surprised they actually cut ties with Gene Segura. We've heard all year that he was a really good leader and all of that. I was really surprised that they got rid of him. Wendell, at this point in the season, he's been the captain, he's been the vocal leader, he's been the vet. It just doesn't seem like a very Marlins thing to do.
No, it doesn't. I'll just point out, the last time, Joey Wendell has not had a multi-hit game since the All-Star break. I kept scrolling and scrolling, looking for it. There's been none. No multi-hit games for a guy that basically only hits singles and occasional doubles. It's been kind of below the line of acceptable offense, even if you think he's an above average defensive shortstop, which I'd say he probably has been, but it's really just not acceptable for a team that is trying to win. And even if those next men up aren't like really forcing the issue, it doesn't hurt to see what you have in those guys before the end of the season a little bit more, get a little bit more intel on either Edwards or Amaya in that position. But yeah, it's a 400 OPS since the All-Star break. I think it is below the line of acceptable performance. I'll be the first one to mention that I was expecting quite a lot from him when he came back from that injury earlier this year. I thought he was a nice floor raiser. I did not imagine that somebody with his track record and ability could be this much of a liability offensively. And but it's things were pretty good. I think when you interviewed him for Unfiltered, I guess that was right around the All-Star break. Things were in pretty good shape. I think he had a mini hot streak around there, but it's kind of the Unfiltered curse. That's when his production has really cratered offensively.
Unfiltered curse. So what have you done to Josh Bell, Isaac? Where is he right now? Is he okay?
What do you mean, Josh Bell?
That was the last Unfiltered guess.
Yeah.
See about the slump? Did you do some voodoo magic to him?
No, he was actually really hot right after that interview. He had a 3-hit game, I want to say.
So you reverse the script now.
Right after that, and then he homered a few days later. But yes, I messed around with him, and I think it was in LA. I was like, yeah, since Unfiltered, you've been scorching the ball, so maybe it was since that he started struggling a little bit. But no, I think I'm going to stop. I think all of us should stop, including Noah, with having a player guest for the rest of the season, just in case there is any bad juju with that. So maybe we'll stop for a while.
Well, he wanted to do a show with David Robertson, and Robertson declined. And you see how that turned out. Yeah, I won't say anything more on that, but he wanted to have him on What a Relief. That would have been, well, you never know how things might have gone differently. That may have been a sliding doors moment in his Marlins tenure.
It exists 100%. That's what I'll say. All right, let's go week ahead. Another one of those citrus series ahead, where now with the new schedule format, you're like AL rival or opposite league rival. You play 4 games against 2-game splits, and there's a day off before that. Other teams have a day off after, but so somewhat of a shorter week. 2-gamer against the Rays, and then have to see the Nationals again. I believe that's the last time the Marlins see the Nationals this year. I think, counting in my head, yeah, I believe it's the final series against the Nats. So just what are you guys really, really looking at coming ahead this week?
Well, I guess you just got to hope for strong starts from Luzardo and Sandy these 2 games. You're going to have a couple of days off, or I guess you get the day off tomorrow, and then I'm looking here. That's the last day off until the following Monday, which is September 4th. So, yeah, you're definitely going to need these guys to go deep, at least give you 6. On Sandy's case, you hope for 7. And then, yeah, you got to really make up some ground in those 4 games in Washington. Luckily, it's 4, and I think by then the Nationals' fire will have maybe gone out a little bit, and they won't be as hot. But then right after that, you get Miggy Rojas and the Dodgers coming into Miami, and that's not going to be easy at all. We just remember what Mookie Betts does against the Marlins. Last time the Dodgers were here, he had 4 home runs and basically 3 games started.
He's making an MVP charge right now.
And we know what he did against the Marlins just a week ago. So they really, really have to, at the bare minimum, split that Tampa Bay Rays series and win 3 out of 4. I think if you don't do those 2 things, then it starts getting ugly, especially considering there really are 4 other teams that are vying for that same one playoff spot that you are, and they're not losing the way that the Marlins are at this stage, and I don't think they will continue to. I don't think they will be losing the way that the Marlins are right now. So at least win 4 out of those 6.
It's a lot to ask, but I mean, all it takes is one chance to catch fire. I don't think today was that motivating game. I would love to.
No, it was not. You can light incense in the clubhouse all you want. You can fix the juju whatever way you want. It hasn't done anything for the offense. Like I said, 8 runs scored against starting pitchers in 45 innings. They have to get to the starters. They've been making their lives way too easy, especially Lugo and Walker in San Diego. They knew what the scouting report said, and they were swinging at 2-0 curveballs. They couldn't wait on Walker's changeup, and it's a very frustrating couple of weeks for Miami's offense right now. It's been awful.
Yeah. Every week moving forward, you need to look at it as taking 2 out of every 3 games kind of the rest of the year to see where they are in the standings at the moment. What now? 1 game over 500. And I think we talked about before that the kind of the bare minimum to get a wild card spot will probably be 84 wins. So that would be going 18-13 the rest of the way. yeah, you can't really afford a single week that was quite like this moving forward. And yeah, it's a mixed bag in terms of their upcoming schedule. Yeah, with this Nats team, they should be better than the Nats though, as well as they had been playing in an extended stretch coming into this. From watching this series, it didn't necessarily look like the Nats were anything special. The biggest reason why you could say they won the series is because they got quality starts from all three of their very mid starters in this one. You didn't even face the biggest boys at the top of their rotation. It felt more like the Marlins struggling more so than the Nats being anybody that you should be intimidated by. So I'm cautiously optimistic that they can win that series later in the week. I mean, as for the Rays, they're in this really weird spot. I think overall they've been playing well even without Wander Franco, and especially offensively, they've continued to be a really good offensive team, even in his absence. Certainly fallen off from where they were at the start of the year, and their rotation at this moment, the Rays rotation is even more vulnerable than the Nationals. It's Zach Eflin and Tyler Glass now, and then a bunch of suspects along with them. Let me take a look at who. I don't know if the Rays have announced their starters yet for those two games. It for sure won't be Glass now. I know that he very recently pitched, and I don't think it'll be Eflin. No, oh, that's right. Aaron Savali is the one that they went out of their organ acquired, and Savali has had a great year thus far. You look at the peripherals, and it doesn't all look legit for him. Like he's a candidate to regress later in the year, even though he has been preventing runs at a really good rate to this point this season. Yeah, so it's it's a relatively tough matchup in terms of the few guys that the Rays do have available to actually start games for them. They'll be coming off an off day, just like the Marlins are. So yeah, you got to find a way to split that series, which is I think that was the case when they went up to Tampa Bay. They had Sandy put the team on his back and steal the second game of that. So yeah, I think that's what you're realistically hoping for this year is splitting this week is splitting that series with the Rays and then winning 3 out of 4 for the Nats.
All right, well, enough said there. So we'll head into fan questions now, but before that, of course, as always, we will pitch. Consider becoming a super subscriber, super follower, whatever you want to call it. It is all access, the Fish on First, everything. And it's just $3 a month as the base price. You can always donate more. Most of our super subscribers do, but there's so many benefits to count, but I usually forget them when I start reading them off. All access to the gift database, game notes before every game that comes straight from the team that usually goes out to the media members. Play fantasy sports with us. I don't know what we're doing for fantasy football this year, but I would imagine that's coming soon. Fantasy baseball as well. We have a Fish on First subscriber fantasy baseball league. One of our super subscribers won our fantasy football league last year. You get to do series predictions with us. With this season coming to a close, there's no chance to win it now. But next year, you can always get in on it. Giveaways. We've given away tickets on these spaces before for super subscribers. I mean, there's just everything. We always bring it up during these spaces because another benefit is you get first priority to speak in these spaces. And ones where we have guests like Craig Mish right before the trade deadline where there's 350 people listening. That's where it becomes really valuable. I'm thinking maybe we start getting some more guests during the off season when we need to fill these shows a little bit better. So I would consider doing it right now. It is just a measly $3 a month. You can go to fishonfirst.com, and it is right there at the top of the screen, I believe, Eli. The click on and subscribe.
Yeah, it's one of the it's the tweet at the top of our profile, this profile, and it's also one of the pinned tweets up here in the space. There it is. Yeah, and you could just go to the site and it's right there near the top. We do have a special one-time perk as well, courtesy of LMF, who I know is requesting to talk. He's got an autographed card of a mystery player in the Marlins organization. And to one person that subscribes by, I guess you could say the end of tonight, might roll that into tomorrow. We're going to pick one of those people to, in addition to their super subscriber perks, they're going to get that free card that is mystery player in this Marlins org. So that's courtesy of LMF, who's been one of our loyal super subscribers the entire way. Yeah, aside from that, we're looking forward to doing some cool things in the offseason with that as well. And the prize for that fantasy baseball league, it's going to be to, I forget exactly what, I guess field level. I think I promised 2 field level tickets to, it's either going to be a playoff game, but if they miss the playoffs, it'll just be opening day 2024. So yeah, I'll keep people posted on the football stuff. We'll finalize that hopefully in the next 24 hours. What we'll do with that.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out tomorrow. Season's coming up, but it's good that we waited because then you guys won't get screwed over by injuries. But I got LMF here. Tell us a little bit more about this card you're giving away to get people fired up, and maybe we can get another super subscriber.
Well, it's a player that is spoken about often on this show, and it's a very nice card. I'm not going to say who it is until we have a winner, but someone that is a fan favorite, has a monster home run at some point in the last couple of years that really pushed the Marlins to a win in that game. And yeah, it's a good card. I think Eli knows who it is, but he's sworn to secrecy here. So.
Is it Nick Fortes?
No.
Is it Garrett Cooper?
No.
All right, I won't guess further. All right, what kind of questions do we have today? And we don't have a lot of people listening, so ask as many as you'd like.
Not so much questions. Well, I do, but let me get a couple points out of the way that I've written down here. Week itself, I'm always positive. I was driving with Ryan on the way home last night. His dad ended up giving me a ride back to Boynton, which really appreciative of that. But they were even saying, dude, for the most positive fan, you're kind of like down today. Yeah, yesterday's loss really took the wind out of my sails. Just more or less the umpiring. I didn't get to see the replay of the pitch, so I'll ask this question: was that pitch that Robertson threw on TV, if anyone was watching, was that a strike or was it a ball?
It was low.
Okay, because when you were there, it did not look low, and I believe you should have got the benefit of the doubt. Regardless, yesterday's really took the wind out of my sails, but as always, there's still a lot of games left. So I believe we are going to finish with at least 84 wins, whether that's a playoff bid or not. That's the type of season we believe that we would get. And they're exceeding some people's expectations there. I had them finished in between 75 and 81 wins. So anyway, I think maybe you guys could join in on this as a question, but you're mentioning Soler's contract, whether he'll opt in or get he probably not opt in, but get that qualifying amount. If the Marlins, they were rumored at least to have conversations with the Royals, what happens first? Do they get the catcher and then make the deal with Soler if there's any money left? Let's say it is Perez, or if they get Perez, is the Soler deal, do you believe, would be totally out of the picture?
I'd go latter 100%, and that's why I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the back end of Salvador Perez's contract is going to be worth it, the sacrifice bringing back Jorge Soler. If it's one or the other, I think the org's definitely going Soler. And right now, I've said this a lot in these spaces, that the catcher position right now offensively is in a really bad spot across the league. You would have to pay a premium price to get a really good catcher. I think there's only three really, really, really good offensive catchers right now. It's Adley Rutschman, Jonah Heim, and Sean Murphy. Of course, they could have had Murphy last offseason, but that's besides the point. I just don't think they're going to go pay a premium price for a catcher that might, maybe hit 240, at best, just to go sacrifice Jorge Soler. That's what I would say.
Yeah, with Salvi, it's going to be an interesting conversation because he's really heavily overpaid. It all depends how much money the Royals are willing to eat, or how much maybe they want to eat in order to save face and get a better return in it. It's a really bad contract. It's not quite as bad as Avi's, all things considered, but it's kind of it might be in that conversation. It might be in that same general area if you think about it, and that's even including how productive he still is. So I think they're going to turn the page on him this offseason, but I have no idea what that's going to look like, because it's not a big market franchise either. It's not one that is typically comfortable eating a lot of money just to get out from under something, especially when it's somebody as important as them. I think that's, even though there are very few options out there that seem feasible, I think it's still a really unlikely one, unless the Royals kind of come to terms with where he is at this stage of his career.
I agree. The next would be, I believe Birdie should be in short every game at this point over Wendell. He's too much in a deep streak. He's not seemingly coming out of it. As you mentioned, it's been since the All-Star break that he's had a 2-hit game. That bottom of the lineup is just atrocious. Let's say it like it is. Do you believe Birdie gets the starts moving forward?
I think he's going to get more of the starts gradually. The longer that this Wendell slump goes on, I think he should get the majority of the starts. The thing is, when you look into his splits, he's just not very productive against right-handed pitching. A lot of his real impact is concentrated against lefties. Against righties, he gets a lot of singles, but he doesn't do much at all beyond those singles. Whereas against lefties, he's a more dangerous offensive player. And that's why ideally they wanted to do that platooning between the two of them. It sounded fine in concept. And now, unfortunately, Wendell has totally cratered and fallen off a cliff where he's not hitting righties at all either. So I don't know what they're going to do. I said earlier in the show that I'd be fine at them turning the page on Wendell and just trying anybody else in that roster spot where it really has reached the point. It's been such an extended struggle and such a severe struggle with him that I think that should be in play. But I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think it's generally that they're going to split time. And I guess Hampson, now that he's on the roster, Hampson will get occasional starts at shortstop as well. It's a really messy situation. It's almost, you could say it's about as bad as the catcher situation, both now and moving forward, unfortunately.
True that. Last thing I'll say, I gotta jump off and finish watching this AEW pay-per-view. The Marlins better enjoy the couple days off they have in the next 2 weeks. As you mentioned, their last day off for 16 games is September 4th. So starting September 5th, they have 16 straight. That coming off of the 13 straight games that they just had until late last week. So hopefully we get on a winning streak, because if they don't get hot now, they're going to fall out of it. They're not there yet. I'm not waving the white flag, but hopefully today's minor victory will set us off. So thank you guys, and everyone, go put that $3 down if you're listening. Go after this card and become a super subscriber this point forward. Minimum $3, of course. If you can donate any more, please do to this young staff. They deserve it. And any money we put into it as listeners, it will go back only to better and more content for us. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Let's get louder.
Hey, we appreciate it. We got Sean coming in here now, and we'll take requests from everyone too. You don't have to be a super subscriber to speak in these spaces. We've only got one right now. Again, it's a shorter show. Did experiment with trying to do this right after the game. I guess we'll go back to normal time. I'll have to figure out what my schedule is going to look like back in school. But we got Sean here. Sean, what's up, man?
Hey, guys. Well, I guess let's keep this question about some of the obtainable positive things rest this season. If just go around the horn, what do you think is most likely to happen in order out of the Marlins finishing over 500, Soler passing Gary Sheffield for second in homers, or Arias still holding on to the batting title?
I would say the most likely of those, I'll still go with Arias and believe in his ability. At this moment, let me just double check this, because I know Freddie Freeman had another multi-hit game, and he's really the only serious threat. Acuna is kind of far enough away that I think it's basically a two-horse race. Freddie Freeman, 3 for 5 today. That made him 351. And Arias just getting the one hit himself. He's down to 350. So it's close. I'm not saying it's surprisingly close. I kind of anticipated when Arias was flirting with 400. I was saying that he's going to finish in the 340s or 350s. And now for him to do that, he's going to come out of the slump a little bit. And I think he will. As LMF mentioned, with still a few off days coming up before this really difficult stretch, maybe that does a little bit, as Arias being a guy that has all these little bumps and bruises that he battles through. So that should help him. I think I'm still feeling pretty good about Arias winning that. If nothing else, I think it's hard to bet against Freddie Freeman, but I think he's going to slow down a little bit. I feel good about him slowing down, and about Arias kind of being close to what he's been for the whole season as a whole. And I think he holds on. That's the one I feel greatest about. In terms of Soler and finishing over 500, Soler, is your hypothetical catching Sheffield or passing Sheffield?
Passing Sheffield, so 43 or more.
I'm gonna lean towards the Marlins finishing above 500 more so than Soler getting to that number, and I think they're both less than 50%. All Soler has to do is actually just copy his August into September, and he'll reach that number. It's easier said than done with him, especially if they remain in this situation where he's one of the few hot hitters on the team. They could pitch around him a little bit more than they've done so far. I mean, for the moment, it's a rise. Well, actually, today it was Josh Bell batting behind him. No, it was actually, take that back. It was a rise today. Nope. I'm looking at the wrong box score. Yeah, today was Bell behind him. So if they continue having Bell right behind Soler, I guess that helps his case. And you could say that maybe that is a factor in why he had such a good August, as on those days of having that protection behind him. I think the batting order is going to have a role in exactly how much Soler hits and how much teams feel they have to pitch to him. A factor in that being how many lefties he faces too, because his production against lefties has been a lot better than against righties this year, and that's where a disproportionate amount of his home runs come in. So I think it's less than 50%, but a decent possibility. I'll say the same thing about the Marlins team. I think they're going to kind of flirt with winning half of their games the rest of the year and slow the slide a little bit. They're going to be, it's almost a coin flip as to whether or not they reach 500. It's less than a coin flip at this point in terms of making the playoffs, but in terms of 500, I think that is still plausible, just not as plausible as a Rise winning the batting title.
All right, Sean,
Okay,
any more
thanks.
questions? Hey, yeah, appreciate it.
Well, one more, I guess, then.
Okay. Yeah, go
I've got you guys on a slow day for closer, now that we're apparently turning the page after this morning, do you think it'll be kind of Scott until he, unless he loses it, like Skip will stick with another set guy, or do you think he'll just really alternate now between Scott and Nardi the rest of the way?
It'll be mostly Scott. I think overwhelmingly Scott, unless on days when he's not available to pitch. Even in between the two, there are some similarities between them, other than Scott has done this job more often, dating back to last year. So I think it's predominantly Scott. I would agree that Nardi is probably next in line. It's good to see AJ Puck kind of straightening himself out, but still not looking quite as trustworthy as he was early in the year. So I don't think he's going to vulture any saves. But yeah, so it'll be mostly Scott as the closer at this point forward. Just a really unfortunate turn of events. We'll see how Robertson has plenty of experience and plenty of positive success as a setup guy before. Like, he's not a guy where his entire self-worth is tied up into being a closer. There are some players like that once you remove them from being a closer, you kind of lose their trust altogether and lose their effectiveness too, because it just it's such a big part of their identity. But Robertson isn't quite in that category. So I still think Robertson's going to be a kind of valuable piece of the bullpen the rest of the year. But it does seem like he's not going to get any closer shots moving forward unless something really unusual happens that presses him into duty. So yeah, I'm hopefully going to a less intense role and simply having time to kind of sort out whatever is going wrong with him helps. But yeah, mostly Tanner Scott moving forward.
Any other questions?
No, all set. Thanks. I'll shut up and listen to the next guy.
I think our next might be our last, so we'll take last calls on any requests. We'll bring in Sharif to possibly round us out here. Maybe tonight I'll get some of the boys to do just answer some questions per bit. Maybe we do it tomorrow on the off day. I don't know. But the reason why we do this is because I want to hear what you guys have to say. But we'll have Sharif take us home here. Sharif, what are your questions?
First of all, good evening. To everyone, love you all, guys. Appreciate the work you continue to do for this community. Today, I think with 38 games left or so, it's time to call things out here. I think the walks are Brett Brown. I know he wants the guys to swing in the zone, but I've seen too many at-bats by Jazz, number one, and Luis Arias. They have to be telling him that they're pitching him inside, and most of the pitches he's swinging at 3-1 would have been a walk. I've seen it in several at-bats. So Jazz and Lewis, they're not taking walks, and it's because, I don't know, when they look at the skip in the dugout, and I don't know what green light he's giving them, but even yesterday, I think Jazz could have given us a better at-bat with 3-0. And he looked at Skip. I don't know what Skip told him, but I don't want to put this all on Skip because our pitching starters haven't really been there. And moving on to batter bats, yes, I just mentioned that. Speed. If Kim is looking at this with 40 games left, I think she has to take her final lunge shot by bringing up Edwards. I think we need speed at the top. We need to be. I think when we've come back in games, it's because of tappers to second base where we cause disruption with speed. And I just think that you're asking, Brett Brown is asking to hit these pitches that are in the zone. And I just think teams are, as teams come into us playing us in the series, they know that. And so maybe speed actually breaks that down when you put the ball in play, and that causes teams to either have to, because I've seen the shift even work on a rise when he hits the ball to right field. He's hitting it right to the first baseman now. So taking walks, better at bats. I don't know if that's a Brett Brown thing, but you're going to have to blame Skip for it. I love what I'm seeing from Sandy and Yuri. I think Sandy could use more of the curve. I see him using a little more of the curve, but use even more, Sandy. And yeah, that's my outlook on it. I watched the game today. Good move. I'm actually happy that Robertson was blown up, because I think we need to make this decision now and put him either in the sixth inning and let Tanner Scott actually do what he's proven up to this time that he can do, which is be our closer. So thank goodness for him blowing us up so we can put him in a better role for our team. But thank you guys for allowing me.
There is something to be said on that last point about Robertson getting blown up, where in a lot of these blown saves, it is, especially when somebody has a really long track record and they were extremely effective even earlier this year, it's hard. You can be stubborn in terms of leaving them in their role and not want to admit that somebody isn't exactly built out to do the job that you brought them in to do. But when he has a game like he had, where it starts off with a very hard hit triple that Jazz almost saved him. I mean, the game could have gone in a very different direction. They could have won the game, and if Jazz makes that catch, but it was such a difficult play, and it was the fault of Robertson for even putting that in the situation. And even though they give up the winning run on the passed ball by Stallings, between that first hit, the hit by pitch in the middle, it was black and white in terms of like Robertson just not getting the job done the way that you would expect him to against the quality of competition that he was facing in this Nats team, that he should be able to, at the very least, keep the game going instead of allowing multiple runs in that situation. It was the kind of performance that just hammers home that you need to try for something better than this, considering that he's now had several of these games like this with hard contact, poor control, and putting you in a situation where even teams that aren't like super committed to winning right now can still get the best out of you. So it was good to have some clarity on that, even though it was obviously disappointing for everybody involved. And Sharif did mention pretty rightly that a lot of Ariza's issues right now have to do with being extremely aggressive and undisciplined. He's only drawn one walk this entire month of August. August is almost over. Throughout the season, he's been aggressive at swinging at pitches, but there have been times where when he gets into a very favorable count and then he gets a pitch that's out of the zone there had been some willingness to take pitches earlier in the year and take occasional walks. And when that part is missing and opponents know that you're not going to be willing to take your walks under any circumstances, that's when it's easier to get to you, no matter how talented you are. So that's been a part of it, and it's been a part of it with Jazz too. The last thing I'll mention with Jazz, I think his center field defense continues to exceed expectations. He's been a very good defensive center fielder this year. And if the bar that he set offensively wasn't so high, maybe people would look at his season a little differently. It does feel like they have a center fielder for beyond this year as well, if he's willing to stay in that spot and depending what other roster decisions that they make. But now the problem is that offensively, he's below average offensive player, and especially when it comes to as a hitter. So this was a tough weekend for Jazz offensively. That there were stretches in between his injuries where if you put the stats together in a certain way, it made it look pretty terrific. But then recently, it's been another really poorly timed slump from him. And he continues to bat in the top half of the order. Even if it's not at leadoff, he's getting a lot of plate appearances. He's not doing very much with them during the last couple of weeks. We've mentioned it before that he was going to be such a crucial piece of this team sustaining and staying afloat in the second half to finally get some decent offense from the center field position that they just hadn't really had when he was out. And unfortunately, like, he's just not hitting at the level that he's capable of so far. So I think they tried out the leadoff spot, and I think some of the concerns about that were fair. That it really doesn't fit his batted ball profile and his whole mindset as a hitter. They shouldn't be batting leadoff, but he's still going to hit pretty high up in the order, especially when they're facing right-handed pitching. And I just don't know exactly what to expect anymore now that we're pretty deep into this year, and you just look back at his overall numbers and they kind of fit his career numbers rather than fitting his 2022 numbers. And that's a pretty significant step back for this team.
Yeah, and, I look at when that sign was given to Jazz at 3-0, and I think Skip realized at that point, Eli, this guy is going to hit the ball either over the fence or it's going to rattle up against the wall. And so he even probably knew, like what you were saying, it's not in Jazz's overall career fit to do that. And I think he just changed him back today. So in that instance, I was like, yeah, if you're telling Jazz have the green light with this 3-0 and you want him to bang the ball hard like that, he shouldn't be in the leadoff. And Jazz, I'm sure you're going to be probably listening to these. You need to snatch the ball like a Venus flytrap. It's not second base where you can gradually grab the ball. You have to snap. It was in his glove, Eli. And the third thing, 3 guys stormed the clubhouse, protected their bodies, obviously, but Sandy, recently Birdie, and I think Garrett. That team meeting, guys, what's supposed to be coming out of that team meeting is I'll hand off the at-bat if I can't do it in this at-bat, which insinuates a walk, or if I fall off until I can walk. And it just hasn't been that way. What do you guys think about the team meeting and then what has happened since? Thank you again, guys.
In terms of those team meetings, it was certainly a different one than the one last year in the first half of last season that has become kind of infamous for the fact that it didn't actually resolve anything. It's been an interesting test. This whole stretch has been an interesting test for Skip Schumacher, considering how highly regarded I think everybody held him after that first half of the season. And now the surprising number of messages I receive of people questioning whether or not they even like him, whether or not they're even confident in him next year, which is the only remaining guaranteed year of his deal, and how he's tried to overcome what is kind of very unusual struggles for him. Even as a player, he was a guy that wasn't on a ton of teams that had these kind of prolonged struggles in the middle of a regular season, and how he's tried to address that. I think they have. I think you could say that he's been a little bit. He hasn't necessarily gone out of his way to uh, create tension with the players or to. I don't know if he's really shown like a huge sense of urgency during the stretch. That's probably something that a lot of us take exception to, is that things are going pretty poorly, especially with a lot of the same players that were having success in the first half. And yet you don't really see that sense of urgency to them slipping from the top wildcard spots, now slipping a couple games out of the final spot from him. But even from the outside, it's hard to necessarily say what's the right way to go about fixing this and the right way to get everybody on the same page in terms of doing those little things right. But it is, yeah, it's not just on him. It probably goes, you could extend that to a lot of the coaching staff as well, that we give them a lot of credit for coming up with clutch hits early in the year. And now at this stage of the season, they've just gone back to really struggling in key situational areas. It's not only on Jazz. I think you could point to the majority of the players on this roster that have come up in important situations and not put together great quality at bats, not made productive outs when it was important for them to do so. Yeah, it's really frustrating. But I don't know if, yeah, this is kind of when you have a rookie manager that's in this situation for the first time. Yeah, he's got to explore what it is the best way to get out of this situation for whatever solutions he's trying to come up with and the team is trying to come up with. I think what they're going through now will serve them better next year moving forward, even though there are a couple prominent players on this roster that could be gone in free agency or via trade during the offseason. There's going to be a lot of continuity on this roster too. So it seems that what they've been trying to do hasn't really worked to pull themselves out of this extended slump. That being said, I think it does serve them well moving forward to go through something like this, to recognize what they were doing in the good times versus the bad times, and try to apply that moving forward to be more consistent next year. Because this inconsistency, this is what really drives people crazy. When you zoom out and you see that this team is over 500 with barely a month to go, that would have exceeded a lot of expectations coming into this year. But when you see that the team that was doing so many of the little things well early on, all of a sudden is not doing them at the most important times, it kind of drives you crazy, I can imagine.
Any other questions, Sharif?
No, I'm good. I think we're all generally behind Skip. We're behind you, Skip. Kim has done a fantastic job, I believe, by locking up a nucleus for the next few years, particularly in the fifth year of, I think, Berger. So, also Berger, I think we need to get 10, 15 pounds off you, because there's some plays you could make at third base that you're wallowing over to it and you're just not quick enough. I'm just going to be honest, guys. Thank you.
Can I say something before Sharif goes? That's all muscle. Like, that's not fat. That's all like, you have to see him, and when you see him in person, maybe on the screen he looks like he's fat. Bro, all that is all muscle. Like when you see him, maybe a little bit of fat on the side, but dude, that's all muscle. Like, I'll tell you, that's all muscle. Like, this dude is a built guy. Like, he literally throws it from sidearm because he can't throw the ball over his arm because he's just like, it's just gonna be, yeah, man. This dude is built like, he is built like a bodybuilder type build. If he kept on putting the work in like that, like, honestly, like, he's not fat. Like, he might maybe lose some pounds, maybe not hit the weight room a little bit, but that's why he can hit the ball so hard, is because when he does swing and he gets contact with it, all that muscle gets the ball out and into the outfield.
Romeo's right, because Berger's a little shorter. Like, he's only, like, I'm pretty short, and he's only like a few inches taller than me. If he was like Soler or Josh Bell's height, he would look like one of them. I'll agree with Romeo there. Oh, Romeo's here. He's going to round up the show now. He is a super subscriber. We'll cut it off there. So what do we got tonight, Romeo?
I just want to thank God himself for letting me be able to breathe the same air as Brian Hoeing and Andrew Nardi. Yeah, those two, as much as people not hate on Hoeing, but I know that he isn't going to be a high leverage guy. I know he isn't going to be this all-time starter, but man, that guy has that dog in him. And if Scott is shaky in the ninth, I'm giving Andrew Nardi the 9th inning, man. That guy has been nothing but nails since he figured out what mechanical issue he had from 2022. Like, that guy is actually, when he comes out and that walk-up song starts playing, it puts a smile on my face when I see Andrew Nardi walk out. That does, like, he's so good, man. It's just, I know it's been a bad week, but you as much as you can, like, critique the bad, you also got to look at the good, man. That was those Brian Hoying pitched really good today, was really one of the bigger reasons that we won today. I know he gave up that double, and then some other stuff happened that he gave up one run, but I want to, like, go back and look at some of his last outings besides the Braves outing and what his ERA would be, because I know that he is playing and he also comes out that bullpen, so if he gives up one run and gets 3 outs, that ERA is going to inflate. But when he's a starter, I need to go look at what his ERA would end up being, because that guy is he's good. Like, there's nothing else that you could put out for Brian Hoying. He's a good pitcher, and I'm glad that, and I hope that he stays, because he could be a good spot starter, long relief type of guy for us for a good while. That's what I'm seeing from him.
Yeah, I don't know if people remember this, but Hoying was essentially DFA'd at the end of last season. They call it a DFA when it's usually during the season, but when it's in the middle of the offseason, he was simply outrighted off the roster and nobody claimed him. He went unclaimed, is the easiest way to say it, at the end of last season. That's how low his stock was, kind of understandably, because of how much he struggled in the big leagues and how limited prospect pedigree he had. And that's definitely not going to be the case this time. He has value on the 40-man roster for somebody that still has minor league options beyond the season, for somebody that has the versatility to handle a few different roles, where he can dial it up a little bit more if he knows he's only going to pitch 1 inning, where he's comfortable inheriting runners when he needs to, and he can go comfortably 2 times through an order. He's one of those many players in limbo where if you push him a 3rd time through the order, it's probably going to end poorly. What he did today, that was kind of the perfect way to utilize him, where he had 1 kind of shaky inning, and even then he limited the damage to just a single run. And then from there on, matched his season high with strikeouts and just generally got a lot of ground balls. So he's been a nice piece to have in this organization. You know what I forgot we haven't mentioned in this show, that George Soriano is on paternity leave. So congratulations to him on the birth of his child. I'll be curious to see. I imagine he'll be back on Tuesday. Usually with paternity leave, it's only a few days. And to this point, it's been 3 days with him. So I'll be curious to see if he's back. That just goes back to the September call-up conversation, where people want all these new guys to come up, but they're going to carry extra pitchers because they have more than 13 interesting guys. So just one thing to keep in mind, one guy that was not part of this weekend was George Soriano for very good personal reasons, but he'll be back on the roster very soon. And he even more so than Hoying is that type of guy that's improved his stock this year, that's shown his versatility. They'll have to make room for him on this roster as well going down the stretch.
You don't think they'll just DFA Tommy Nance?
That's an option. Yeah, well, they don't have to DFA him. They could actually option Nance. He still has 1 option to go. Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that is the most likely corresponding move. Yeah, assuming that Soriano is back on Tuesday. The fact that they haven't even used Nance, including today, they had a bullpen game and their most well-rested reliever wasn't used. I think that was pretty telling. So that would be my prediction. Yeah, that Nance goes down as soon as Soriano is back, likely on Tuesday.
So we're gonna end up predicting that it'll just be one. It'll be 1 and 1 for both of the position for the September call-ups. 1 pitcher and one outfield player.
That's what we assume.
If they do, like, this team they get weird with it a little bit. If they were to go with, let's say, 2 pitchers or 2 position players, who would you guys believe those 2 position players or 2 pitchers would be? I've seen Kim like 7 times today. Another little fun fact. She was walking around the stadium with someone.
We mentioned it at the top of the show, but we really don't see a world where there's going to be 2 position players just because they really need someone to fill out innings. My belief would be that it's going to be 1-on-1 with Edwards and whatever pitcher they decide, whether it be like a mid-tier reliever to just fill some innings or another starter and maybe go 6-man or something like that. But I wouldn't 100% rule out 2 pitchers being called up. I mean, I don't think it's likely, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think a one-on-one is probably going to be standard for most teams. It would be Edwards and someone else if I had to guess.
Yeah. And it's really not calling up a pitcher. It's just bringing a pitcher back. It's Soriano from paternity leave, and that's going to be Cueto from the IL. We think that he's going to be back when he's eligible next weekend. So if that is not the case, then maybe there's interesting possibilities if Cueto has some sort of setback that makes him, but it wasn't even an injury with him. It was a viral situation where it was an illness rather than an injury. So with him coming back, it's just that there's a lot of pitchers to use. We could take this opportunity just to shout out Troy Johnston, who hit another home run today. This is 24th of the year. He has 109 RBIs in 111 games this year in the minors. If he played any other position other than first base, they would have room for him. But being a first base only guy, that's the reality with him, where he's going to have to, unless there is a surprising injury at the very end, or unless they do something very bold with Yuli Gurriel and sit him down or get rid of him, then I think Troy just has to wait for the offseason to be selected to the 40-man roster.
How is Troy's defense? I feel like that's the question, because that's the thing that's wrong with Bell in the ninth inning when the last 3 days, or the last time that they go into the ninth, they bring in Gurriel to come hit or like play that defense role. So
I wouldn't put him as a clear upgrade over Bell. I'll put it that way. It's not a strength of his game, because actually he used to be an outfielder before he went to the minors, and so he's not even a totally natural first baseman. They would not call him up as a defensive replacement. They would just call him up on the hitting side if there was any at bats available to him, but there just aren't those at bats available.
And before we go, I'll leave it with this. So we're like 100% thinking that it's Xavier Edwards coming up on September 1st, or
like 99%, 99.
Do you think that they shock the world ever and bring not because they're Troy's not coming up, but Dane is there.
40 man.
Yeah.
Has Dane been good since he went back down?
He hit a home run yesterday.
He's been decent. He's been decent. He's not as red hot as he was before the call, but he's still fine. With him, it's just there's only so many spots that you have to fiddle with here. And considering how much he was struggling before he got sent down, I think it's a long shot. It's a possibility, but it's kind of a long shot for Dane to come back.
I like that guy. He has to be the unluckiest player in all of baseball. Like, honestly, like that guy was getting like 90 plus, like off the bat, and it was just a glove every time. And like he would like at the back end he was striking out a little bit, but like he was just
His girlfriend / wife, I don't know what their relation is, was in this space for quite a while. I don't know if you noticed that. Fiance? Okay, yeah.
I believe so.
Keep up with the personal lives of the Marlins.
No, I think it's his wife. Her name is Mallory Myers. Yeah, Mallory's a nice lady. She's a nice lady. She likes baseball too. Congratulations to them as well. I know this happened a while back, but they're also having a kid. So hope you guys have a good time. I love you guys. Become a super subscriber for $3. Yeah, that's all it is. You get perks. You get to join them fantasy leagues. I'm getting smacked, but yeah.
All right, well, we'll go out on that. Appreciate everyone for listening in. Make sure to keep up with all content.
I think Sharif wanted to bring up one final thing at the end here before we go out.
Let him go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot about this, guys. But what are your thoughts on Fortes calling the games, the change from him with Yuri? Seeing the change, obviously, the last 3 times callings was using with Yuri. I think Fortes isn't helping himself by the way he calls Garrett late in games, the 3rd time round in batters. What's your thoughts on that? I apologize, but I thought that was important.
I don't know how much of it is about Fortes as much as it is the matchups they were facing. I was excited to have him face the Dodgers because he was getting into this pattern where Yuri was so dependent on just 2 pitches, his fastball and his slider. And when he faced more left-handed batters, that makes him kind of utilize the full depth of his arsenal. And because he was able to do that against the Dodgers, even being at the platoon advantage, like he's been amazing against lefties this year because his curveball is unhittable And his changeup, even though he still doesn't use it as much as I'd like, is also an extremely good pitch when it's on. He could in both of those outings against the Dodgers a week ago, and then just last night against the Nationals. The Nationals are the same way, where that lineup was pretty heavy on left-handed hitters, and he was incredible against them in those situations. I think a lot of it was those matchups and how they dictated what Fortes would call just based on who the opposing hitters were. So I'll keep it brief and say that I think it had more to do with matchups than it had to do with the differences in the catchers. The weird complication is that Stallings has now been the hotter hitter than Fortes has been recently. And actually, we should clarify that it was Stallings that was catching yesterday instead of Fortes. So I wanted to clarify that. It actually was Stallings yesterday who was calling the pitches.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, because I see where Fortes maybe saying, let's milk this just in general. And I see Stallings saying, you also have this third and this fourth pitch. Let's try these. And if you don't have them, we'll try to have three that you could work with. And I just see Fortes telling Garrett, let's just work with hot. And I just saw the Washington Nationals timing that up, that curve, that nice curve that he had. And they just timed it up in the sixth inning.
All right, I guess we can head out on that. For those who are still left, make sure you tune into all content this week. Maybe later in the week we'll do another fan question thing, so we only got to a few people. But thank you all for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your night.